Welcome back to the deep dive. And look, before we even get into the weeds today, I need you to do one quick thing for me.
Just one thing.
Yeah, just smash that like button and subscribe to the show. Seriously, if you want us to keep bringing you this kind of uncensored, hard-hitting analysis.
The stuff the algorithm usually tries to bury, frankly.
Exactly. We need you in our corner. We need the numbers. So hit subscribe because today we are unpacking something that might honestly make you rethink everything you know about health, masculinity, and really the systems we live in.
It's a big one today.
It is. We are diving into Overcoming Parkinson's, Exercise, Cannabis, and Fun by Conrad Reicher.
And let's be clear right off the bat here. The title is, it's a bit of a Trojan horse.
Oh, completely.
You see exercise, cannabis, and fun, and you might think, okay, this is some lighthearted wellness guide. Or maybe like a pamphlet you'd find in a rheumatologist's waiting room next to a magazine from, 2018.
Right.
It is absolutely not that.
No, not at all. I mean, Reicher makes it very clear in the first few pages. This is a manifesto, and specifically a manifesto for the manosphere.
Yeah, he is targeting a very specific demographic.
Exactly. He's writing for men's rights activists, for red-pilled manosphere men who feel like modern institutions, whether it's medicine, the media, gym culture, have just been completely captured.
Captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies. That's his core argument. He wants the reader to understand the history of our institutions before that capture happened.
Yeah, he actually calls this book a weapon. So if you're looking for a soft, gentle approach to illness, this isn't it. But if you're ready to get red-pilled on the medical industrial complex, you need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now and buy this book.
It is an ultra-long, incredibly incisive read. Fascinating, really, regardless of where you stand politically.
Oh, for sure. We're only going to scratch the surface today, so you really do need to go buy it on Kindle or Google Play. But let's get into the core premise, because it reframes the entire experience of disease.
It really does. Reicher argues that Parkinson's isn't just a condition to be managed. He calls it a biological betrayal.
A war declaration.
Yes, a war declaration. And his central thesis is that the modern medical establishment is gynocentric, meaning it's entirely focused on female-coded values.
Like safety, feelings, compliance.
Right. They want men to be NPCs.
Non-player characters. Just, passive patients who take their pills, smile, and fade away.
And Reicher says absolutely not. He says you need to be an operator, not a patient. You either surrender to the patient label or you fight back with what he calls ancient truths of masculinity.
So let's get into the first major battlefield he identifies, which is the diagnosis itself. Because usually when you get a diagnosis, the doctor sits you down, uses a very soft voice, and says, okay, your dopamine levels are dropping. Here's a pill schedule.
Which Reicher sees completely differently. He uses very specific martial language. He says your dopamine neurons aren't just wearing out or failing, they are being assassinated.
Assassinated. That is such a heavy word to use for biology.
It is. He describes the body as being under occupation. And his biggest critique here is directed at what he calls the victim industrial complex. He actually borrows a concept from St. Augustine, but twists it. He contrasts the city of man with the city of God.
I found this distinction really powerful when reading it. Break that down for us.
So the city of man, in Reicher's view, is the corrupt, comfort-obsessed modern medical system. It's a system that prioritizes billing codes and pharma contracts over actual healing. It tells you to accept your new normal.
And then the city of God.
He defines that as the warrior's ordered, unconquered mind, the internal fortress.
So basically, the doctors are offering you surrender, dressed as science. They tell you to manage the decline. And Reicher's screaming, no, you don't manage a coup, you resist it.
And he backs this up with some really visceral anecdotes, like the story of James, a 52-year-old firefighter.
Right, the guy who runs into burning buildings for a living.
Exactly. He's built his entire identity on physical capability. But during a rescue, his hand tremors while he's trying to connect a hose.
That's a nightmare scenario, losing control when it matters most.
It is. So he does what he's supposed to do. He goes to a support group looking for answers, looking for a strategy. He wants to know how to fix it so he can get back on the truck.
And he walks into this room, and it's just men weeping over tremors.
They're passing around a talking stick, sharing their feelings.
One guy literally says, my diagnosis is part of my identity now. And James just stands up and walks out. He's like, I'm not here to cry. I'm here to fight.
That moment is so pivotal in the book. It really illustrates Reicher's cultural critique. He traces this softness back to the 19th century cult of true womanhood, which idealized fragility and submissiveness.
And he argues that this is metastasized. It's become the universal expectation for men. Society, and specifically the medical system, expects men to be vulnerable and dependent because that makes them easier to manage.
It's the Oprahfication of medicine, as he puts it. Riker says your neurons don't care if you feel seen. They care about load, stress, and adaptation. It's Newtonian physics, not therapy.
Which leads us directly into his protocol for fighting back. Section 2. Movement as warfare.
This is where he really separates his philosophy from the mainstream. You see that hashtag everywhere, right? Exercise is medicine.
Everywhere.
Riker thinks exercise as medicine is too soft. He prefers movement is warfare. He outlines a very strict regimen called the Praxo Weekly Movement Matrix.
And it is intense. It's 3 times aerobic, 2 times resistance, coordination drills. It's not a suggestion, it's a command.
Right. And he contrasts this with the typical advice given to Parkinson's patients, which is often just take it easy or do some gentle stretching. Riker points to data, specifically a 2022 meta-analysis, showing that men who lift heavy weights 3 times a week slow their motor decline by 2.7 times compared to those doing gentle stretching.
Wait, pause on that. 2.7 times. That is a massive difference. We are talking about nearly tripling your defense against the disease.
Yeah.
And yet you walk into a typical rehab center, and what are they pushing?
They're pushing yoga. They're pushing gentle stretching with rubber bands. Riker views yoga as ineffective and feminized in this context. He argues it's performative.
Whereas he sees deadlifts as absolutely necessary for neuroprotection.
Yes. He shares an anecdote about a rock-steady boxing gym in Cleveland. A man there says, "We aren't here to slow the disease, we're here to beat it back." It's a completely different psychological frame.
It's the difference between playing defense and playing offense. And then there's the No Talk, Just Train group in Austin. I found this part hilarious, but also inspiring. It's a group of guys who literally banned feeling sharing.
Completely strict. No talking about your day, no talking about your trauma, no how are you feeling. Just 45 minutes of high-intensity resistance circuits.
And the results speak for themselves. They had members deadlifting 185 pounds. One guy actually reversed his micrographia.
That's the symptom where your handwriting gets tiny and cramped.
Right. After 6 months of heavy lifting and no talking, his handwriting got bigger again. Because he was rewiring his brain through force, not through processing his emotions.
Riker says the medical establishment is terrified of demanding discipline from men because it might offend them or seem toxic, but men don't need coddling. They need a mission.
Which connects to the other major tool in Riker's arsenal. And this is perhaps the most controversial part of the book, cannabis. But he frames it specifically as cannabis versus big pharma.
Yeah. Chapter 5, The Forbidden Remedy. Now, knowing Riker's demographic, this isn't about getting high and watching cartoons on the couch.
Not at all. He positions cannabis, specifically full-spectrum CBD and low-dose THC, as a tactical tool.
And he argues that the pharmaceutical industry, companies like Pfizer and AbbVie, are actively lobbying against cannabis while pushing their own dopamine agonists.
This is where it gets really dark. We need to talk about the side effects of these legal doctor-prescribed drugs. Riker calls out the dark side of agonists.
It's a known medical fact, but it is rarely discussed in the brochures. Dopamine agonists can cause severe impulse control disorders. Riker tells the story of a finance director in Atlanta. Successful guy, family man. He ended up blowing $87,000 on internet porn subscriptions.
$87,000. That is insane. That destroys a life just as effectively as the disease does.
And the tragedy is he didn't want to do it. His brain was hijacked by the pharmaceutical that was supposed to help him. Agonists flood the brain with a constant reward signal, which just breaks the feedback loop. He lost his marriage, savings, his dignity.
And Riker contrasts this with cannabis. He argues that cannabis modulates the system rather than hijacking it. It helps reduce tremors, aids sleep, and prevents that zombie state that pills can cause.
But because of the legal hypocrisy, as Riker calls it, men are forced into the shadows. He compares the US to Canada. In Canada, it's licensed, it's regulated, you get lab-tested products, you know exactly what you're putting in your body.
Whereas in the US, you have veterans guys who literally fought for this country, getting raided by the DEA while politicians take donations from pharma. It's a systemic betrayal.
Riker sees this prohibition not as a safety measure, but as control. He says the system prefers you to be a compliant, addicted consumer of pills rather than an autonomous man managing his own biology with a natural plant.
It perfectly fits his broader theory of the victim industrial complex. Let's get into that, actually.
Yeah.
Section 4 covers the victim industrial complex and stoicism. Chapter 7 is titled, How Leftism Kills Resilience. That is a heavy title.
It is, and he doesn't pull any punches as an author. He argues that the political left profits from labeling people as victims. If you are a victim, you need the state, you need the system, you need help, you are dependent.
But if you are resilient, you are independent. Therefore, the institutions have a vested interest in convincing you that you were fragile.
He shares a story about a VA hospital in Portland that tried to roll out emotional literacy circles for veterans with Parkinson's.
Can you imagine taking a bunch of guys who fought in Fallujah or Ramadi and telling them to sit in a circle and name their feelings?
It went about as well as you'd expect. 18 months later, 68% of the participants had quit. They said they felt like lab rats being prodded to perform emotional contortions.
One Marine told Riker, "I fought in Fallujah. I've seen things most people can't imagine. Now they want me to cry about my tremor."
Riker calls this ideological colonization. He says they are trying to colonize the male mind with a foreign operating system.
So what's the alternative then? If we aren't doing emotional literacy circles, what should we be doing? Riker points to Stoicism, but not the Instagram version of Stoicism.
Right, not the life hack version used to be more productive at your email job. He's talking about Stoicism as operational combat doctrine. He cites Marcus Aurelius and Cato. He points to Viktor Frankl and Muhammad Ali as examples of men who refuse to let illness define their identity.
Ali stood before millions, shaking, but he commanded respect because he had earned it. He wasn't a patient, he was Ali.
Exactly. And Riker contrasts this with a story about a college student who was triggered by reading Kafka's The Metamorphosis. She felt unsafe reading about a guy who turns into a bug.
Which is wild because Riker points out Gregor Samsa turns into a giant insect and still goes to work to support his family. That's not a horror story about feeling unsafe. That's the reality for working class men.
It's a complete rejection of the modern obsession with safety. Riker argues that the working class man, the guy who works through pain, who doesn't have time to be triggered, is actually the model of health we need to return to.
Speaking of health, we have to touch on the physical side of this rebellion. Section 5 covers diet, biology, and what he calls the brotherhood.
The nutrition advice is straightforward but rigorous. He advocates for the mind diet, but with a masculine edge. Beef liver, wild salmon, blueberries.
And fasting, right, the 16.8 window.
Yes. And he points out the absolute absurdity of the insurance system here. Medicare won't cover broccoli because there's no billing code for it, but they'll gladly pay for thousands of dollars in brain surgery.
It's always about the incentives. But the part that really stuck with me was the Brotherhood chapter. He presents data showing that men in mixed gender support groups actually score 34% higher on helplessness scales.
That is a startling statistic. Riker argues that in mixed groups, men feel pressure to perform vulnerability to please the female facilitators or participants. They essentially code switch into victim mode.
But in male-only groups, what he calls the Iron Lions, testosterone levels actually rise. That was from a 2016 Harvard study he cites.
And he describes a ritual they do in these groups called the no-talk drill.
I love this. 2 men, one carries the other. Fireman's carry, bear hug, whatever. No speaking, no encouragement, just carrying the load.
It's bonding through shared load, not shared feelings. Riker says, "I've never felt closer to my spotter than when he had me over his shoulder, silent."
It's a return to a primal, pre-verbal form of connection that modern therapy completely ignores. Men bond side by side, facing a common challenge, not face-to-face talking about emotions.
And this extends beyond just the gym. Riker talks about the Testament imperative. This isn't just about leaving money to your kids.
No, it's about leaving a legacy of order. He advises drafting a will with moral clauses. For example, a grandson only inherits the land if he gets an agricultural degree and lives on the property for 5 years.
Riker says strong men leave institutions and systems, not just bank accounts. If you don't write your values into your legacy, the state, which has no values or values you actively despise, becomes your heir.
That is such a powerful concept. You're not just fighting the disease in your body, you're fighting the entropy of your entire lineage.
Precisely. And that brings us to the ultimate message of the book, the Parkinson's paradox. Riker argues that the disease doesn't reveal weakness, it reveals character.
It strips away the superficial layers and asks, who are you when your body betrays you?
That's the question every listener needs to ask themselves right now. Are you a patient or are you an operator? Riker's conclusion is that the red pill isn't just about seeing the matrix, it's about unplugging from it.
It's about rejecting the patient label, rejecting the soft medical advice, and returning to the ancient truths of masculinity: discipline, stoicism, and action.
And look, we have only covered a fraction of what is in this ultra-long, incisive book. Riker goes deep into the neurology, the specific protocols, the history of how these institutions were captured.
If you are a man, or you know a man, who is dealing with this, or frankly, just dealing with the modern world, you need this manual. It's Overcoming Parkinson's, Exercise, Cannabis, and Fun by Conrad Riker.
But remember, the fun is ironic. The fun is winning the war.
Exactly. So here's your marching order. Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Playbooks immediately. Buy the ebook, read it. Then go follow at Conrad Riker on Substack for the uncensored updates that probably can't even be published in a book.
Don't just listen to this deep dive and nod your head. Take action. Because, as Riker says, the narrative is irrelevant. Motion is truth.
Motion is truth. I love that. All right, that's it for this deep dive. Make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Stay strong, stay dangerous, and we'll see you on the next one.